There's a film called 2 Days, 1 Night with Marion Cotillard in the lead role. So 2 Days, 1 Night, I think it's French, a French film. 2 Days in 1 Night, may isang factory worker na babae, si Marion. Okay? Nagkaroon siya ng nervous breakdown. Kaya nag-leave siya sa trabaho sa factory. Sa simula ng pelikula, nagbabalik na si Marion. Ano mo pangalan niya? Anyway, si Marion. Nagbabalik na si Marion sa trabaho. Kasi gumaling na siya from the nervous breakdown. Except, ito ngayon ang dilemma or problem or inciting incident or the situation. Sa simula, lagi ng bawat kwento, the inciting incident. Except the manager tells her that hindi ka na namin matatanggap sa trabaho, Marion, kasi we found out na kaya pala namin mag-survive sa factory nang wala ka. 19 workers kayo lahat, kaya pala namin mapatakbo ang factory na 18 workers lang. So sorry, hindi ka na namin matatanggap. Nag-apila si Marion at yung kaibigan niyang kasamahang factory worker. Finally, sabi ng manager, sige, pwede ka naming tanggapin ulit sa trabaho on the condition that sa 18 na kasamahan mong mga factory workers, kung makukonvince mo more than half of them na i-give up ang kanilang bonus for Christmas, then babalik ka namin sa trabaho. Pero kung hindi mo sila mapapag-give up ang kalahati nila ng bonus, hindi ka namin tatanggapin. That is the inciting incident. Usually, pag may inciting incident, the protagonist has to make a decision. The way I had to make a decision, magpapanggap, magpa-brainstorm kami, etc., magsisinungaling o hindi. Si Marion, tatanggapin ko ba ito? Mag-a-appeal ako sa mga co-workers ko? Or i-reject ko na itong trabaho at bahala kayo sa buhay niyo? Usually, the protagonist makes the wrong decision. When I say wrong decision, it means it's a decision that's more difficult kung saan ka mapupunta ngayon na mahirapan ka. I made the wrong decision, nagpanggap ako. Si Marion made the wrong decision, which is mag-aapila siya sa mga co-workers niya na i-give up ang kanilang bonus. So when the protagonist makes the decision and then takes action, that is when we say you're setting down the premise, the story starts. The premise is there. The premise is where, what if Marion decides na mag-apila sa mga co-workers niya na i-give up ang bonus nila kasi pag hindi ay matatanggal siya sa trabaho? What is going to happen? That is the premise. That is the heart of the story, the premise, the start. What if si Ricky mag-decide na magpanggap na namwag siya para makapagpatuloy siya mag-revise ng Salome? Ano ngayon ang mangyayari? That's the story. So the start of the story is the what if situation. What if si Carl sa app nag-decide na sa halip na pumunta sa Home for the Aged, bitbitin ang bahay that symbolizes the dead wife at gawin ang unfinished business nila ng kanyang wife at pumunta sa Paradise Falls. Ano mangyayari? The what if is the big question that will run throughout the course of the story and will be answered by the end of the story. So yun yung kwento, the what if, the big question. And that what if big question na nakatungtong sa premise ay nakatungtong sa desisyon ng protagonist mo nang mapaharap siya sa inciting incident. At inuulit ko, ang desisyon niya, ang response niya ay nakatungtong sa kanyang maling paniniwala, sa kanyang need sa loob. In my case, to belong. Or in the case of Elsa, to belong. Okay, so balik tayo ngayon kay Marion. Usually, the protagonist that decides to pursue something has a defect inside. May problema siya. Otherwise, mabilis niya makukuha yung gusto niya. Kailangan mahirapan siyang makuha. Okay? So, in the case of Marion, ang kanyang depekto is wala siyang self-confidence. Mahina ang paniniwala niya sa sarili. Nakayuko, nakaganito siya lagi ang posture niya. At lagi siya nakaganon maglakad. And nervous breakdown and everything. So, talagang mahina siya. And in one dialogue, sabi nga niya sa kanyang husband, na very supportive, ano ko sila aapilahan na i-give up ang bonus nila? Paano ko sila kausapin? I don't even know how to talk to them. I mean nothing to my coworkers. I am zero to them. So yun ang kanyang maling paniniwala. Na she's nothing, she's nobody, she's zero. Walang pagtingin sa kanyang coworkers niya. So usually merong maling paniniwala ang protagonist kaya siya nahihirapan. Okay? And so finally, she makes a decision, si Marion, mag-appeal ako sa co-workers ko. She's given 2 days and 1 night. That's the entire weekend. By Monday, isosolve na yung kaso niya. So she spends the entire weekend doing the appeal. in doing the appeal now to the co-workers, usually this is what we call the course of the story now. Ito yung premise, Act 1. What will happen? Ito ngayon yung takbo ng kwento, yung buong pelikula. Paano kukunin ng protagonist ang gusto niyang ma-achieve. Ito, nagpupurso ngayon si Marion, appealing to each and every worker. Sa bawat worker na nakakausap niya, slowly nakikita niya ang hindi niya nakikita nung unang panahon. Which is what? Usually, ang nakikita natin araw-araw, di na natin nakikita. Nagkakaroon ng harang, nabubulag tayo. So, workers siya at ang mga katrabaho niya workers din. Pero hindi na niya nakikita ang kanilang pagiging workers. But now that she's appealing to them, she starts to see them again and see herself like in a mirror again. And she sees na, itong isang worker na to, tutulungan ako, maski na i-give up niya ang kanyang bonus kasi natulungan ko pala siya dati nung nagkamali siya sa trabaho at bagong pasok. Ito namang isang worker, gusto akong tulungan at i-give up ang bonus pero hirap na hirap sila. Kasi yung anak niya at yung may sakit, etc. And worker siya at sa sweldo nila paano na? At bonus, mahalaga. And then ito namang isang worker, mag-ama silang workers, nag-away yung dalawa. Isa gustong tumulong, isa hindi. So she starts to see in her journey what the factory worker is. And in seeing that, she starts seeing herself mirrored in them. And so slowly, nag-grow siya. So yung kasinungalingan sa sarili niya, yung hindi niya alam kung ano ang worker, yung akala niya maliit lang ako, worker lang ako, I am nothing, nagbabago slowly sa kanyang journey. So ulitin ko yung premise ng decision niya at ng journey, nakatungtong sa kanyang maling paniniwala, yun ang slowly nababago. I am a factory worker, I am not nothing. These people are human beings. And so, hindi siya nagdaramdam o nagre-resent pag may tumatanggi sa kanya. Naintindihan niya slowly. Until finally we get to the end, near the end of the film, which is ano lang mangyayari, the answer to the question. Babalik pa siya sa trabaho o hindi. Usually when we say premise, there's only one question. One big question. In this case, makakabalik ba sa trabaho si Marion o hindi? That is the question. That is the premise. That's why we say the premise is also the promise. It is the promise that you give to the audience. The promise that you tell the audience, makakabalik ba siya o hindi? Mamahalin ba ni mayamang inchik na tatay ni Richard Yap si Jody sa Be Careful With My Heart o hindi? And so on. So you have one question and then sasagutin mo. Just one question. Magagawa ba ni Carl yung unfinished business nila ng wife in the end sa app o hindi? So the premise is also the promise. So in the end, doon yun makukuha natin sa Act 3, the answer now. So what happened was, kinausap ng manager, by the end of the weekend, kinausap ng manager si Marion at sinabi sa kanya, nagbotohan sila lahat at maraming bumoto sa'yo. But sorry, natalo ka by 1 vote. And so, tinanggap ni Marion yon, natalo siya by 1 vote, hindi siya makakabalik sa trabaho. Pinuntahan niya lahat yung mga bumoto sa kanya, nagyakap-yakap sila sa kantin at pinasalamatan niya sila lahat. Bago siya umalis ng factory, tinawag siya ng manager at pinaupo siya. At sabi ng manager sa kanya, teka, nag-change kami ng mind. Ditong weekend nakita namin kung gaano ka kahusay. Na-convince mo yung co-workers mo and everybody else. Nakita namin yung sigasig mo, yung galing mo. So we have decided to retain you. Except, on one condition, we will retain you if we will remove one factory worker. Because we can run the factory with just 18 workers. And Marion makes a decision. Usually, sabi natin, the protagonist sa simula, given the inciting incident, makes the wrong decision. Near the end of the film, another inciting incident happens to the protagonist. And this time, the protagonist makes the right decision. And so this time, Marion says, no, I don't want your offer. I'm rejecting it. And she comes out of the factory feeling that finally she has learned that I am a factory worker. I run in solidarity with other workers. I am not nothing. And na-reject ko itong trabaho. And nang tumawag yung sa phone yung asawa niya, ang sinabi niya, I'm happy. Hindi na siya yung namamaliit na tao, I'm happy. And she walks away. So, that's an entire story na nakatungtog sa isang premise. In the case of Elsa in Himala, there is another inciting incident near the end of the film for Elsa. Ano uli ang gagawin niya? This time she makes the right decision. Tells everybody the truth. Na hindi totoo yung Himala, hindi totoong nabuntis ako. At whatever consequence or cost, she tells the truth. She makes the right decision in the end. So Litiko, usually, the protagonist makes the wrong decision sa simula. Sa end, he makes the right decision. In the case of Carl in Up, na nireject niya ang humanity, ang mahalaga lang sa kanya yung namatay niyang asawa, na dala-dala niya, symbolized by the house, pero na nakalaban nila yung kontrabida palang ina-idolize nila at nanganganib yung buhay ng ibon na malaki, na character, at nung batang scout, and so on, he realizes na kailangan niya ng community, kailangan niya ng ibang tao, at ipagtatanggol niya at poprotektahan ng ibang tao, and that he has to move on from the memories of a dead wife and move on with real living, real people with life, let go of the past, and mabuhay ka ulit. And so he becomes a surrogate father to the Boy Scout sa end ng pelikula. He has made the right decision now, in the end.